I never imagined I'd find myself wanting to ruin someone's life until Brenda Walsh decided to sink my patrol boat in the dead of night. She thought destroying my property would scare me off and silence me. She couldn't have been more wrong. Instead of walking away, I used that wrecked boat as the key to uncovering a $3 million HOA fraud she was desperately trying to keep buried. Brenda made a mistake that night. She poked a beast she had no chance of controlling. Before I dive into how it all unfolded, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. What happened after that changed Pine Harbor forever. After my forensic accounting firm collapsed alongside the rest of the tech sector, I needed an escape. Pine Harbor Estates, an upscale lakeside neighborhood in Sarasota, Florida, looked like the perfect refuge. With what I had left from selling off company shares, I bought a house at 23 Anchor Drive mainly because it came with a private dock for my old patrol boat, PTE-47. But PTE-47 wasn't just a boat to me. She was a floating time capsule, a relic of my youth, my military service, and countless nights patrolling Caribbean waters. I picked her up at a Navy auction for $15,000, convinced she was meant to be my loyal companion through a quiet retirement. More than just a vessel, PTE-47 represented 2 decades of brotherhood, sacrifice, and duty. She was the last physical link to a version of myself who valued honor above all else. I hadn't even unpacked my boxes when the HOA dropped off a welcome packet thick enough to rival a tax code. Inside was an 81-page rulebook, a list of 67 banned activities, everything from unauthorized paint colors to where you could park your car. There was a monthly meeting schedule and, most notably, a highlighted regulation, Rule Number 34, marked in bright yellow. It stated that any watercraft longer than 30 feet required prior HOA board approval before docking. PTE-47 measured 32 feet, and I hadn't asked permission. The fact that someone took the time to highlight that rule told me I was already under surveillance. This wasn't a neighborly misunderstanding, it was a planned move. Someone had been preparing for this showdown before I even arrived. That week, I attended my first community meeting in a rec center that felt more like a corporate boardroom. Brenda Walsh ran the show from behind a podium, dressed like a Fortune 500 executive. Her hair was a flawless brown bob, her navy blazer probably worth more than most people's monthly rent, and her gaze swept the room like a tactical scanner. At first glance, she seemed like your typical overzealous community leader. I didn't notice the dark rings under her eyes or the slight tremble in her hands when she wasn't holding something. I didn't realize yet that those weren't the signs of a woman fussing over property values. They were the marks of someone terrified for reasons far bigger than lawn maintenance. "We have a new resident," she announced with a practiced smile. "Mr. Thompson from Anchor Drive. Welcome to Pine Harbor." She asked if I had reviewed the watercraft regulations, and when I hinted at the possibility of an exception since I'd purchased my boat before moving in, something cold flickered behind her pleasant exterior. "Regulations are regulations, Mr. Thompson. We can't, the HOA can't create exceptions. Property values, you understand." That little correction mid-sentence struck me. During my Navy intelligence days, we were trained to listen for verbal slip-ups that betrayed hidden pressure. Brenda was under a kind of strain that had nothing to do with neighborhood aesthetics. She kept checking her phone, scanning the parking lot like she was expecting someone, and stressed the importance of avoiding unwanted attention with an urgency that felt way out of proportion for a conversation about boat sizes. When another resident asked about the community budget, Brenda switched topics so abruptly it felt like watching a classified briefing being cut off mid-sentence. This wasn't the behavior of a control freak clinging to HOA power, this was a woman on the edge. Later that night, while checking PTE-47 under the dock lights, I found that 3 of the 4 anchor bolts had been deliberately loosened. One decent storm and she'd be floating loose, potentially wrecking other boats or slamming into the marina. Tucked under my windshield wiper was a carefully handwritten note: "Some boats belong in museums, not neighborhoods." A concerned community member. The handwriting was neat, distinctly feminine, and the yellow highlighter on the envelope matched the one from my HOA welcome packet. But instead of reacting with anger, instinct and 2 decades of military discipline took over. I photographed everything, secured PT-47 with additional lines, and assessed the threat level as amateur for now but escalating. The next morning, the first official move came, a violation notice, printed on whole letterhead. Dear Mr. Thompson, your watercraft exceeds community regulations. You have 72 hours to remove it or face fines of $150 per day. A Pine Harbor HOA board. The timing told me everything. Brenda had drafted that letter before I'd even set foot in that meeting room, before I asked for an exception, before she pretended to consider my case. This wasn't about rules or property values, it was about removing me and my boat from Pine Harbor at any cost. The real question that kept me up that night wasn't how I'd move a 15-ton vessel in 3 days, it was why a suburban housewife was so desperate to get rid of me that she'd resort to sabotage. I thought she was just another petty hoe tyrant on a power trip. I had no idea she was fighting to save her daughter's life and that mine was about to get caught in the crossfire of a war one didn't know existed. But unlike typical hoe dictators who drown you in fine notices, Brenda escalated things the way I'd seen covert ops run overseas. Within a week, new security cameras popped up, angled perfectly to monitor my dock. A suddenly formed neighborhood watch group materialized, 23 members, all conveniently interested in keeping the community safe. The primary role of this so-called neighborhood watch seemed to be keeping tabs on anything out of the ordinary, and a rotating patrol schedule quickly formed to ensure someone was passing by my house at set, predictable times. Back in the Navy, we'd have called this a surveillance grid. Here in Pine Harbor, Brenda Walsh dressed it up as community involvement. The speed and precision of the setup made one thing very clear: this wasn't her first rodeo. And rather than sticking to the typical hoe harassment tactics of endless citations, Brenda escalated to financial warfare disguised as official hoe policy. I started receiving bills labeled as special assessments. First was an $800 dock safety inspection, a requirement applied exclusively to my property. Then came a $1,200 environmental impact study that, oddly enough, only required my participation. Not long after, I was hit with a $2,000 increase in marine insurance premiums, curiously affecting only the one household in the community with a boat. Every one of these charges was technically within HOA bylaws, and each came with a 30-day deadline, backed by the threat of property liens if left unpaid. It was an attack too precise to be coincidence. Someone behind this had legal experience and knew how to weaponize bureaucracy. This wasn't petty harassment, it was a calculated campaign of financial pressure, designed to force me out or grind me into submission. Not long after, I was contacted by Greg Foster, a former board member. The fact that he reached out through an encrypted email account told me plenty about how paranoid communications had become in Pine Harbor. We arranged to meet at a Starbucks well outside the community, and over coffee, he filled me in on what he'd witnessed. According to Greg, Brenda hadn't always been like this. When she first arrived, she was the epitome of a friendly neighbor, baking cookies, joining book clubs, volunteering for every event. Then, one day, she was elected board president, and overnight, everything changed. He described a calculated purge of anyone who questioned her authority, including himself. After he dared request a look at the financial records, Brenda fired the long-standing accounting firm, switched the community's banking without board consent, and when Greg formally asked to see detailed statements, he was voted off the board within a week. The pattern suggested that something or someone had gained leverage over her right around the time she seized control. That's when my training kicked in. I started comparing the Walsh family's lifestyle to their reported income. Brenda's husband ran a small contracting outfit, pulling in maybe $85,000 a year. She worked part-time doing bookkeeping, probably bringing in around $25,000 more. Together, they made about $110,000 a year. But their expenses painted a different picture. Brenda's BMW X5 lease alone was $800 a month. Their daughter attended a private school that charged $28,000 a year. They'd recently done a major home remodel, a new pool, outdoor kitchen, the works easily worth over $150,000. By my calculations, to sustain that lifestyle, they'd need to be making at least $200,000 a year, almost twice what their legitimate income could cover. After years of investigating financial fraud for the military, You develop an instinct for when the numbers don't add up. Then came Dorothy Hernandez, a sharp-eyed retired teacher in her 60s. Dorothy had been around Pine Harbor for over a decade and a half. One afternoon while I was tending my garden, she approached me. "Ben, honey," she said, "I've lived here long enough to see patterns, and this is one." According to Dorothy, families didn't simply decide to move out of Pine Harbor, they got pushed out. She handed me a handwritten spreadsheet that would have impressed any professional auditor, a meticulous list of every family that had left since Brenda's rise to power. The Williams family, for instance, were slapped with $8,000 in fines for unauthorized garden changes after questioning a landscaping bill. The Petals endured constant noise complaints when their kids played outside, conveniently after they'd asked about the community's finances. The Johnsons, meanwhile, were buried under a pile of minor architectural violations until they finally sold their home at a loss, all because they dared request to see contractor payment records. The pattern was clear: ask questions about the money, and you'd be driven out. Then, one quiet evening as I worked on my laptop near an open window, I overheard a phone call that shifted my entire perspective on Brenda Walsh. Her voice trembled with the kind of fear you only hear when someone's world is falling apart. "Vinny, you have to understand how this is complicated now. There's a new neighbor, a broken bar, military background, a broken bar. He's asking questions. No, I can't just make him disappear. And don't you dare threaten my family." There was a long pause, the kind where someone's listening to instructions they'd rather not hear. Then came her defeated reply: "Okay, a broken bar, okay. I'll find a way to fix it. But if you go near my daughter, our deal is off, for good." In that moment, everything snapped into focus. Brenda wasn't running this operation, she was a pawn. Someone with real power, someone capable of making credible threats against families, was pulling her strings. The pieces of the puzzle finally locked into place, just like those old intelligence cases I'd worked years ago. Brenda Walsh wasn't the true villain in this story. She was a woman trapped in a situation far more dangerous than anything a power-drunk HOA president could concoct. The surveillance grids, the financial harassment, the systematic exile of residents who dared question authority. None of it spoke of petty suburban tyranny. It was the desperate damage control of someone coerced into betraying every principle she once lived by. After 2 decades of Navy intelligence work, investigating everything from smuggling rings to espionage cases, I'd learned how to spot the signs of someone under duress, and Brenda showed every one of them. Fear clung to her like a shadow. The following day, the depth of her desperation became unmistakable. A final warning arrived, not in the usual home mailer, but slid under my door at 3 a.m. The letter threatened that my boat would be towed at my expense if not removed by Friday at 5 p.m. and that legal action and escalating fines would follow for non-compliance. What made this message truly alarming wasn't its content, but the circumstances. My security camera, which had faithfully recorded every raccoon and Amazon delivery for months, conveniently malfunctioned between 2:45 and 3:15 a.m. Someone had crossed the line from official harassment into covert intimidation, operating in the dark to maintain control. I'd misjudged Brenda. She wasn't drunk on authority, she was trapped in a nightmare where protecting her child meant destroying her neighbors. And I had unknowingly become the most dangerous threat to her family's survival. 2 days before my life would be permanently altered, Brenda received a phone call that left her with no good choices. Vincent "Vinny" Romano, speaking from his Tampa office, delivered an ultimatum with no room for negotiation. "Brenda, sweetheart, I hear your new military neighbor's poking around, forensic accounting background, asking about money. That makes me very nervous." She tried to reassure him, promising that I'd move my boat by Friday. His reply made her blood run cold. "You don't get it. Guys like him don't stop at boats. They see patterns. You have 36 hours to make this problem disappear, or we will." The rest of their conversation painted a clear picture of what Brenda was up against. Eliminate didn't mean kill, it meant make the problem want to leave. And she'd done it before. But the threat that followed would haunt her forever. "Remember your beautiful daughter Emma, 16, dance classes every Tuesday and Thursday at that studio on Manatee Avenue. Talented little thing. It'd be a damn shame if something happened to that promising future of hers. Brenda's desperate plea not to involve her daughter was met with ice-cold indifference. "Handle your problema, broken bar, or I'll handle mine." After the call ended, Brenda sat in her car, hands trembling as she stared through the kitchen window at Emma practicing dance routines in their backyard. The impossible choice before her was agonizingly clear: either destroy a stranger's cherished memories, or risk losing her daughter forever. She knew simply towing PT-47 would spark too many questions. Paperwork, witnesses, a paper trail of authority that might eventually lead someone back to the community's financial inconsistencies. But if the boat just happened to sink from mechanical failure, the insurance investigation would focus on the owner, not the hose books. And the emotional devastation of losing a military memorial might be enough to drive me out of Pine Harbor for good. Solving Vinnie's problem in a way that left Brenda's hands technically clean. It was a plan born from fear, sharpened by terror, the kind of desperate scheme only a fundamentally decent person would attempt when shoved into an impossible corner by people who treat violence as a line item on a budget. Friday evening found Brenda circling Sunset Marina repeatedly, taking mental notes of camera positions and escape routes like her daughter's life depended on it, because it did. By 9 p.m., she was researching boat sabotage techniques on the internet, leaving a digital trail that would later serve as a road map for federal investigators. At 11 p.m., she drafted a fake insurance claim citing suspected engine trouble, preparing to report it anonymously as a concerned early morning jogger. Her makeshift supply list was tragic in its simplicity: an old wetsuit from college, a waterproof flashlight, rubber gloves, a kitchen utility knife, and a plastic bag to keep her phone dry. Each item was a grim testament to a mother who'd been backed into a corner by forces beyond her control. By 2:47 a.m. on Saturday morning, Brenda's Honda Civic was parked in darkness about 150 meters from the marina, just outside the reach of security cameras, but near enough to swim to PT-47 without exhausting herself. Conveniently, the marina's camera system was mid-upgrade, leaving coverage gaps no one in Pine Harbor was meant to know about. Only one working security camera remained active that night, aimed at the parking lot. The West Dock, where PT-47 was moored, sat in a convenient blind spot. For 15 agonizing minutes, Brenda Walsh sat behind the wheel of her car, summoning the nerve to commit an act that shattered everything she once believed about right and wrong. The water was bitterly cold against her skin as she eased down the launch ramp and slipped beneath the surface. Her waterproof flashlight cut eerie shapes through the dark water as she swam toward my patrol boat. Underneath PT-47's hull, her trembling hands set to work, not out of malice, but out of terror. She wasn't sabotaging a boat, she was trading a stranger's memories for her child's life. As brutal as it was, the choice left her no alternatives. While working in the shadows, her flashlight's beam caught the polished bronze of the memorial plaque affixed to PT-47's console, USS Defiant, in memory of those who served our nation. For a harrowing moment, Brenda froze. She realized she was about to destroy a vessel that wasn't just fiberglass and steel, it was 20 years of loyalty, brotherhood, and sacrifice. A tribute to those who'd stood watch in places the world would never see. Her phone buzzed in its waterproof pouch. A message from Vinnie. "How's the midnight swim going? Don't disappoint me. I know where you are." The text, sent by someone monitoring her from a distance, slammed shut any chance of turning back. Later investigations would uncover that Vinnie had stationed a spotter nearby to ensure Brenda followed through, adding yet another layer to the relentless coercion surrounding her. With tears mingling with lake water, she finished the sabotage, scoring a fuel line and loosening the drain plug just enough to eventually flood the bilge, hoping it would look like routine mechanical failure. But any seasoned marine investigator would spot the amateur work for what it was. In her haste to escape before dawn, Brenda made a crucial error. One of her rubber gloves snagged on a sharp edge, tearing off a small piece about the size of a quarter. It slipped into the water and lodged along the boat's waterline, a silent witness to the crime she never realized she left behind. At 6:03 a.m., using a prepaid burner phone she'd purchased in cash days earlier, Brenda called the marina posing as a concerned early jogger. She reported the faint smell of gasoline and a boat sitting low in the water. The timing was critical, 44 minutes before marina staff would have found the problem themselves, adding another suspicious marker to the case against her. When my phone rang at 6:47 a.m. with news that PTE-47 had gone down, something inside me tore loose. Standing at the marina, staring at the lone mast protruding from 15 feet of dark, oily water, I felt a brand of loss veterans know all too well but can rarely explain. PTE-47 wasn't just a boat. She was a living museum of my youth and the nights I spent patrolling hostile waters, the faces of friends long gone, and the unshakable code we lived by. Watching her disappear beneath the surface felt like a funeral for every sailor, every mission, every principle that had given shape to my adult life. Brenda's arrival at 9:15 a.m. was straight from a Hollywood script. Coffee in hand, wide-eyed concern painted across her face. "Oh my God, I just heard. This is awful. I'm so sorry for your loss." But when she let slip specific details about the boat's mechanical issues before any diver had even assessed the damage, my instincts kicked in like a silent alarm. Her strangely specific knowledge, coupled with an almost visible sense of relief that the boat no longer violated HOA policy, was enough to paint a damning picture. "At least it's not a problem for the HOA anymore," she muttered, immediately catching herself. "Sorry, I didn't mean it like that." I'd assumed Brenda was a petty tyrant escalating her HOA harassment into vandalism because she couldn't stomach someone challenging her authority. What I didn't realize was that she had just committed a felony under duress to protect her daughter Ray, and in doing so, had left behind evidence that would unravel a far-reaching criminal conspiracy buried beneath Pine Harbor's carefully manicured streets. When the professional salvage crew raised PTE-47 3 days later, the evidence was obvious to anyone who understood boats. The dive team leader surfaced, shaking his head grimly. "Ben, somebody cut your fuel line and loosened your drain plug. No way this was an accident." The most damning find was the torn fragment of a rubber glove clinging to the hull, and a tiny, overlooked mistake that would ultimately link Brenda to the sabotage. The marina's insurance investigator quickly labeled it deliberate vandalism. What he didn't see, though, was the larger operation at play. Years of naval intelligence had trained me to recognize the difference between random destruction and a calculated move designed to neutralize a threat. Then came Tyler Brooks, a 35-year-old CPA and Pine Harbor's HOA accountant, reaching out via a seemingly casual LinkedIn message that read like someone too frightened to speak plainly. "Ben, we need to talk about HOA finances. Meet me at Barnes Noble, business section, Saturday, 2 p.m. Come alone." Among shelves of personal finance guides and leadership manifestos, Tyler's hands shook as he confessed how Brenda had trapped him in a spiraling fraud operation. It started with personal blackmail and escalated to laundering money for figures like Vinnie Romano. "She's got recordings of me signing blank approval forms," said they were for future votes, but she filled them out after payments to shell companies. "If anyone investigates, I look like the mastermind while she plays the innocent president following my advice." Desperate to cover a $40,000 loss from reckless crypto day trading, Tyler had accepted a loan from Brenda. That debt turned into a collar around his neck, forcing him into complicity. With Tyler's uneasy cooperation, I finally gained access to Pine Harbor's financial records and a trail of corruption stretching far beyond what I'd imagined. Tyler called it an external audit consultation, but we both knew what it really was. I was investigating the HOA's financial system from the inside, tracing money that had been systematically siphoned from the people who trusted us to protect their community. The forensic accounting skills I'd honed while tracking military fraud turned out to be priceless here, uncovering the staggering scope of the theft piece by piece. "Tyler, no games. I need the real number. How much has Brenda taken?" His hands trembled as he opened the financial ledger on his laptop, his voice barely a whisper. "Ben, a broken bar. It's worse than you think." "Way worse. How much?" "Tyler, 700,000. In 18 months." The number felt like a gut punch. $700,000, more than most families made in a decade, stolen from people who believed their HOA dues were paying for landscaping, security, and clubhouse repairs. Money taken from neighbors who trusted their board members to act in their best interest, not line their own pockets. My quiet surveillance of Brenda's daily routine began to confirm what I'd started to suspect. This wasn't some petty embezzlement scheme, it was organized crime at work. Every Tuesday, like clockwork, Brenda would drive to the Westfield Mall, park in the garage, and walk to an adjacent office building. That building housed Romano Construction and Associates. She'd spend exactly 45 minutes inside meetings that never appeared in any HOA board records. On Fridays, she made trips to properties scattered across Tampa's warehouse district, visits she claimed were for personal errands, but the consistency of her stops and the addresses she visited told a different story. Business dealings disguised as routine outings. Weekend house hunting excursions made even less sense, especially for a woman whose husband had no intention of moving. But for someone quietly managing a growing portfolio of real estate purchased with stolen HOA funds, it made perfect sense. When I dug into Vinny Romano's background, the reason for Brenda's constant fear became unmistakably clear. Romano was no ordinary contractor. Romano Construction pulled in $2.3 million a year, an eyebrow-raising figure for a local builder whose main clientele included cash-heavy businesses like restaurants, laundromats, and car washes. My contacts in private security circles got me access to databases linking Romano to multiple federal watch lists for suspected money laundering. 3 previous investigations had tried and failed to nail him, each one collapsing under witness intimidation and strategically lost evidence. His personal wealth painted an equally damning picture: a $1.2 million waterfront estate, a yacht worth more than most homes in Pine Harbor, and a garage full of classic cars that no legitimate contractor could afford. His lavish lifestyle was funded by money that didn't come from construction projects alone. As I followed the financial trail, the mechanics of the laundering operation came into focus. Stolen HOA funds were funneled through a maze of shell companies, empty corporations existing only on paper, before being transferred to accounts controlled by Romano. From there, the cash was invested in legitimate rental properties that generated clean income. The kicker: all of these properties were managed by a company called Walsh Property Services, registered under Brenda's maiden name. The business didn't advertise, didn't list employees, and had no website. Its only purpose was to create clean, legal-looking financial trails for dirty money. In just 18 months, the operation had purchased multiple rental properties outright, financed entirely with money meant for Pine Harbor security gates, playground upgrades, and storm drain repairs. And no one had noticed a broken bar until now. The total value of those real estate investments had climbed to nearly $2.8 million. The properties generated enough legitimate rental income to launder the stolen money effectively, while providing Romano with a growing portfolio of profitable assets, all purchased with other people's hard-earned dues. Using a long-range listening device set up on public property near Romano Construction, I managed to capture a conversation that revealed the full scale of what I was up against, and it was worse than I imagined. "Brenda, baby, everything's been smooth as silk." Vinny's voice crackled through the headset. "But this Thompson guy, a broken bar, he's a problem. Former military investigator, financial forensics background, exactly the type who can follow a money trail from HOA payments to our rental deals." When Brenda tried to reassure him, insisting that sinking my boat would tie me up with insurance claims and keep me too busy to dig into the HOA's books, Vinny's response made my blood run cold. "That's not enough anymore. A guy like him won't quit just cause he lost a boat. If he won't leave on his own a broken bar, we'll give him a reason to go." What followed was a calculated campaign of psychological warfare that made Brenda's earlier petty HOA harassment seem like harmless bickering. Suddenly, fake complaint letters started showing up under my neighbors' doors, detailing supposed incidents of me behaving erratically and causing confrontations since the boat incident. Anonymous reports began flowing to the HOA board, alleging late-night suspicious activities at my home and raising concerns about potential insurance fraud. Mass email blasts to Pine Harbor residents warned of my alleged deteriorating mental state, claiming that military veterans sometimes exhibited delayed trauma responses that could pose a danger to the neighborhood. It wasn't just rumors, it was character assassination on a professional scale, executed with resources and precision far beyond what a suburban HOA president could pull off on her own. Tyler Brooks quietly passed along the most chilling piece of Brenda's escalating strategy, a comprehensive blueprint designed to force me out, financially and socially. "She's going to ruin your reputation first," he told me, his voice trembling, "then bankrupt you with legal fees." "I've seen the plan A. It's broken down in phases. Phase 1. Circulate the rumor that I intentionally sank my own patrol boat to collect on the insurance. Phase 2. Manufacture neighbor complaints to justify HOA citations, harassment letters, and fines. Phase 3. Impose new special assessments targeting waterfront properties. Conveniently, the kind I owned. To bury me under unpayable fees and legal costs. Phase 4 would culminate in a lawsuit for non-compliance, one designed to bleed me dry with legal fees until I'd be forced to sell my home just to stay afloat. When I asked Tyler how he knew so much about Brenda's plan, his response made my stomach drop. "Because she's already printed the fake complaint letters," he admitted. "I've seen them, all in the same handwriting." "But who's going to call for handwriting analysis in the neighborhood squabble?" It was then that the full scope of what I was dealing. Meanwhile, Brenda was staging her own final performance, unaware the curtain was about to fall. Phone taps picked up her panicked conversations with Vinny Romano, scrambling to plan for the possibility that I might go public. "If Thompson presents his evidence, the feds'll have probable cause for warrants on every one of our fronts," Vinny warned. "What are our options if it all goes sideways?" Brenda asked, her voice brittle with fear. Vinny's response was calm, almost casual, and it sent a chill through the FBI monitoring team. Brenda's refusal to greenlight physical violence meant Plan B went into motion, discrediting me publicly during the home meeting with fabricated evidence. The goal was to paint me as an unstable, paranoid veteran imagining conspiracies and faking insurance fraud. That night, the Pine Harbor Community Center looked less like a neighborhood meeting space and more like a makeshift courtroom. A room built for 80 was packed with 127 tense, restless residents. The air practically hummed with anticipation as people who'd quietly endured Brenda's rule sensed the tide might finally turn. Brenda's strategy was straightforward: control the agenda, limit my speaking time, and flood the room with falsified evidence before I had a chance to speak. She came prepared with doctored photographs allegedly placing me near my boat the night it sank, forged email chains plotting insurance fraud, and anonymous witness statements claiming I'd harassed board members and threatened neighbors. But her attack was the spark I needed. The moment Brenda finished her character assassination attempt, I stood. "Thank you for bringing your evidence, Brenda," I said, my voice steady. "Because I brought some of my own, and I think this community deserves to see it." The color drained from her face. "Before we vote on anything tonight," I continued, "let's talk about where your money's actually been going." The room fell dead silent. "Brenda, would you care to explain why we paid Sunshine Landscaping $12,000 last month for work that was never done?" I asked. She stammered, her face turning pale. "Or maybe you'd like to tell us about Aquatic Solutions," I went on, "whose listed business address is a Starbucks parking lot." The room erupted. Residents who'd watched their HOA fees climb while services vanished now realized where their money had disappeared to. Dorothy Hernandez stood, papers in hand. "I've been tracking this for months," she said. "My late husband was a CPA. He taught me how to spot this kind of fraud. Brenda's been stealing from us, and I can prove it." Greg Foster, a former board member forced out for asking too many questions, added his voice. "I tried to audit the finances while I was on the board, and Brenda blocked me at every turn. Now I know why. She was covering up theft, big theft." Angry voices filled the room. Phones came out, recording everything. Residents called friends and family to tell them what they were witnessing. "How much did she steal?" someone shouted from the back. When Brenda attempted to dismiss my evidence as fake documents to deflect from my supposed insurance scam, I delivered the final blow. I hit play on the audio recording. Brenda's voice, clear as day. "I handled the boat problem like you asked." Vinny Romano's voice followed, casually discussing how smoothly their laundering operation was running, detailing the funneling of HOA funds through fake companies into property investments. A stunned silence swept the room. Then it erupted. The carefully constructed image Brenda had maintained collapsed in an instant. Surrounded by a furious crowd, her composure cracked. Through tears that spoke of more than embarrassment, she confessed. "You don't understand what was happening," she sobbed. "Vinny threatened my daughter. He knew where she went to school, a broken bar, what route she walked home. I never wanted to steal. I thought if I paid off my debts, he'd leave us alone. I didn't think it would go this far." 18 months of fear and guilt came pouring out as she admitted the full scope of her involvement and how it had started. That was all the FBI needed. From the back of the room, federal agents posing as concerned residents revealed their badges. "FBI, nobody move," Agent Martinez ordered, as 6 undercover agents secured the exits. "Brenda Walsh, you're under arrest for money laundering, embezzlement, and criminal vandalism." Vincent Romano and his associates are being arrested as we speak at locations across Tampa Bay. Phones captured the sight of their HOA president being led out in handcuffs while federal agents took control of the meeting. It was a moment none of us would ever forget, when a quiet suburban neighborhood uncovered a multi-million-dollar criminal operation running right through its streets. As she was led away, Brenda turned one last time to address the room. "I'm sorry for everything," she said. "But you need to understand, a broken bar Romano's operation is bigger than this neighborhood. There are other HOAs, other families, people being threatened just like we were. Don't let this stop here. Make them investigate everything." Agent Martinez stepped forward to address the room, offering both closure and hope. "We'll be initiating asset forfeiture," she announced. "Property seizures and account freezes will recover the majority of stolen funds. Each household should expect around $5,800 in restitution within 6 months. And thanks to the evidence uncovered tonight, we're moving against similar operations across 3 states." As federal agents cataloged evidence and my neighbors tried to absorb just how deeply they'd been betrayed, I was struck by a familiar mixture of satisfaction and sorrow, emotions I'd known from military operations where justice was delivered, but at a high cost to families and communities. Brenda's actions had torn Pine Harbor apart, and the repercussions of her choices would linger for years. 3 weeks after the arrests that shattered Pine Harbor's carefully maintained image of tranquility, the investigation revealed a scope none of us had imagined. Vincent Romano's plea deal with federal prosecutors unraveled a money laundering operation that had embedded itself in 12 homeowner associations across Florida, siphoning off $4.7 million over 5 years and devastating the lives of families who trusted the very people sworn to protect their communities. Their scheme had specifically targeted middle-class neighborhoods, places where residents paid hefty monthly dues but rarely scrutinized the details of financial records. It was the perfect cover for embezzlement disguised as ordinary community maintenance. It was also discovered that James Morrison, Pine Harbor's former treasurer, who'd supposedly died in a rain-slick car crash, had uncovered the early stages of this operation. A court-ordered search of a safety deposit box registered to Morrison revealed documents, photographs, and audio recordings that laid bare the conspiracy. Forensic work on his Toyota Camry confirmed what his family had long suspected: his brake lines had been cut. Morrison had been murdered for daring to expose the same corruption I later stumbled upon. Agent Martinez confirmed as much during a follow-up meeting. "This wasn't an accident," he told me grimly. "They killed James because he got too close. And it wasn't just about money, it was about sending a message to anyone else who might ask the wrong questions." The healing process in Pine Harbor began with a complete overhaul of the HOA board. In the first truly transparent election the community had ever held, Dorothy Hernandez was unanimously elected as president, bringing with her the fairness and structure honed from years as a teacher. Robert Kim, with his engineer's precision and suspicion of unchecked authority, was made treasurer, while Lisa Chen's meticulous nursing records experience made her an ideal secretary. The new leadership swiftly enacted reforms. Any contract over $500 now required 3 board member approvals, external audits would be conducted every 6 months, and residents were granted open access to financial records and monthly transparency meetings where they could raise concerns without fear of retribution. As for PTE 47, I chose not to replace her but to restore her as a memorial to both James Morrison's bravery and the hard lesson that truth, no matter how deeply buried, has a way of surfacing. Thanks to the insurance payout and recovered HOA funds, We had a $68,000 budget for a professional marine restoration. Volunteers from the community asked, some of whom had never so much as held a wrench, joined seasoned boat owners to dedicate over 200 hours bringing her back to life. When the restored vessel was rededicated as Pine Harbor Integrity, we installed plaques honoring both Morrison's courage and our community's resilience in the face of betrayal. Brenda Walsh's federal sentencing was a somber moment. She faced charges for money laundering, embezzlement, and accessory to murder. Her sentence was 12 years, reduced from a possible life term due to her cooperation with prosecutors and documented coercion. The judge acknowledged the impossible position she'd been placed in by Romano's threats against her daughter, but made clear that her crimes had still caused immense harm. When Brenda was led away to begin her sentence, my thoughts went to Emma Walsh, a teenager who lost her mother to a nightmare of secrets and threats. And when Vincent Romano received a life sentence, I thought of James Morrison as the man who had died trying to stop the same evil. Romano's attempts to intimidate witnesses even while in federal custody only added to his charges, sealing his fate. The collapse of his network resulted in 15 additional arrests in Florida, Georgia, and Alabama, and prosecutors estimated that total recovered funds would eventually exceed $12 million. 6 months after the investigation wrapped, Emma came to visit me at PT 47's dock. Now 17, she carried herself with the quiet strength of someone who'd endured more than most adults. She was preparing to attend college on an engineering scholarship funded partly by community donations, determined to specialize in infrastructure design that prioritized honesty and public welfare. "Mr. Thompson, thank you," she said, her voice steady. "I know you're sorry for what happened to my mom, but you saved us." Prison is giving her a chance to heal. For the first time in years, she's not afraid. She handed me a letter from Brenda, written on federal prison stationery. In it, Brenda expressed a depth of remorse I hadn't expected. "Dear Ben," it began, "I know no words can undo the harm I caused to you, to James Morrison, and to our community. But your investigation saved my daughter's future. You exposed a truth that needed to come out, no matter what it cost me. In prison, I've learned what courage really means. Not protecting yourself at others' expense, but standing up for them when the price is unbearable. You showed courage. I didn't." Emma's studying engineering because she wants to build communities with the integrity you demonstrated. She shared that Emma was thriving in school and maintaining regular contact with her. Brenda herself was earning her GED and training as a paralegal to help other incarcerated women navigate a system most never imagined facing. Out of Pine Harbor's ordeal, I built Integrity Investigations, a consulting firm dedicated to HOA financial audits, fraud detection, and board training. We provided free services to communities suspected of corruption, while offering preventative consulting to others. In our first year alone, we audited 23 HOAs, uncovered $1.88 million in fraud, made 6 criminal referrals, and trained over 200 board members to recognize the early signs of financial misconduct and coercion. The most surprising revelation came from Dorothy Hernandez. While combing through old HOA records, she found a photograph linking my past with Morrison's in ways I'd never anticipated. The two of us, side by side in Navy dress uniforms at a commissioning ceremony for the USS Defiant, the same ship that had once carried PT 47. "Maybe you were meant to finish what he started," Dorothy said quietly. And I realized then sometimes the most vital battles we fight aren't the ones we anticipate, they're the ones that ambush us in the neighborhoods we call home. 2 years after Brenda Walsh was arrested, Pine Harbor had become a national model for community transparency. Our annual Community Day celebration drew visitors from neighboring states eager to learn how a neighborhood could recover from betrayal and emerge stronger. The event centered around PT 47 Integrity, now fully restored and serving both as a living memorial to James Morrison and an educational platform, teaching residents and visitors alike how to safeguard themselves against fraud. We awarded scholarships in Morrison's name to local students pursuing careers in public service, while the community garden, library, and recreation spaces projects once neglected by a corrupt board flourished under honest leadership. And through it all, I understood something that had eluded me before: the most lasting victories are often the quiet ones, won not on battlefields, but on front lawns, in board meetings, and in the hearts of those who refused to look away. Community gardens now thrived in spaces once marred by fake contractors and fraudulent projects, turning symbols of deception into places of growth and renewal. Emma Walsh's graduation summa cum laude from the University of Florida's civil engineering program stood as a testament to the power of second chances and the kind of redemption that makes even the most skeptical believe in transformation. Her senior thesis focused on designing transparent financial management systems for community organizations, featuring digital safeguards capable of preventing the kind of fraud that had once consumed her own neighborhood. During her speech as class valedictorian, Emma spoke candidly about learning integrity from people who had every reason to despise her family but instead chose compassion. Sometimes the greatest lessons come from those who show mercy when revenge would have been easier, she said. True community healing requires both accountability and forgiveness. Meanwhile, Brenda Walsh's rehabilitation in federal prison had surpassed every expectation, including her own. Through completing her GED, earning certification as a paralegal, and undergoing intensive therapy for trauma and gambling addiction, she reinvented herself from a desperate suburban housewife into an advocate for other incarcerated women. In her letters, she described teaching financial literacy to fellow inmates and working alongside federal prosecutors to help identify other neighborhoods targeted by organized crime through their HOA boards. "I can't undo the harm I caused," she admitted in one especially heartfelt letter, "but I can spend the rest of my life trying to prevent other families from enduring what we did." "Every woman I help avoid my mistakes honors James Morrison's memory, and the trust Pine Harbor gave me a second chance to earn." The unraveling of Romano's criminal enterprise continued to reveal itself in surprising ways. Federal investigations expanded into Alabama and Georgia, exposing similar home money laundering operations in the suburbs of Atlanta and Birmingham. Ultimately, authorities recovered more than $15 million in stolen funds, providing long overdue restitution to over 3,000 families who'd unknowingly financed criminal activity through their association dues. Romano's continued attempts to direct operations from inside a maximum security prison only brought him fresh charges and further justified his permanent separation from society. My firm, Integrity Investigations, had grown beyond a consultancy into a movement of sorts. Former clients became advocates for financial transparency in their own communities, spreading awareness and vigilance. Our business model, A, providing free services to victimized neighborhoods while charging fees to well-managed associations, A, proved both financially viable and personally meaningful. In just 3 years, we audited 47 HOAs, uncovered or prevented over $3.2 million in fraud, made 12 criminal referrals, and trained more than 500 board members across 7 states to spot financial irregularities and signs of organized crime infiltration. On a personal level, what had started as professional collaboration with Dr. Sarah Mitchell, Pine Harbor's community counselor, quietly deepened into something more. What began as joint efforts to help our neighbors process betrayal and rebuild trust evolved into a relationship rooted in mutual values, service, integrity, and a belief that justice should heal, not just punish. Sarah's expertise in trauma recovery perfectly complemented my investigative background, allowing us to approach community consulting as a unified team, addressing both financial corruption and the emotional aftermath it leaves behind. Pine Harbor's transformation into a national example of HOA transparency and community resilience caught widespread attention. We were featured in Community Living magazine, Better Homes Gardens, and even an episode of 60 Minutes, drawing visitors eager to learn how a neighborhood could rebound so decisively from systematic betrayal. Policies we'd implemented after Brenda's arrest: A, monthly financial transparency meetings, external audits every 6 months, board member background checks, and open resident access to financial records, A, were soon adopted by hundreds of other communities determined to avoid similar disasters. But more importantly, it was the culture shift and the refusal to accept blind trust in authority and the insistence on asking hard questions, A, that safeguarded Pine Harbor's future. Corruption would no longer take root unnoticed. The restored PT-47 Integrity became my favorite spot for reflection, especially at sunset when the lake shimmered gold and dolphins broke the surface in playful arcs. Sarah often joined me during those evenings, and our conversations drifted from ongoing investigations to larger questions about justice, forgiveness, and the courage required to rebuild not just communities, but faith in each other. Then, 3 months ago, a phone call reminded me that Romano's network hadn't yet fully disappeared. The caller introduced herself as the president of an HOA in Jacksonville. "We found your business card," she said, "in the drawer of our recently deceased treasurer, alongside a photo of you and James Morrison at what looks like a military ceremony. We've had financial irregularities, and after reading about Pine Harbor, we believe you need to see what we've uncovered." What followed was the exposure of yet another Romano associate running a similar money laundering scheme, a proof that while our fight in Pine Harbor had been decisive, it was merely one chapter in a much larger battle against the infiltration of suburban America by organized crime. People sometimes ask whether I regret moving to Pine Harbor, whether I wish I'd chosen a quieter retirement destination where the biggest HOA controversy was about landscaping instead of federal racketeering indictments. And my answer never changes. This community taught me lessons the Navy never did about the kind of courage that shields neighbors, the honor that demands accountability, and the justice that heals instead of wounds. Most of all, it showed me that sometimes, when your boat sinks, it becomes the anchor that pulls an entire community back to the surface, stronger and more united than before. If you're facing questionable HOA leadership or financial misconduct where you live, remember this: one person with courage and evidence can protect hundreds of families. Document everything, find allies, and never give up on the principle that the truth will always surface, even from the depths of the deepest lake. Subscribe for more true stories of ordinary people standing up to corruption and winning. And never forget, in America, integrity still matters, justice still prevails, and communities can still protect themselves when people choose courage over convenience.